Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Unleashing Potentials podcast. So, joining me today is Duncan. Duncan, how do I say your full name?
So my name is Duncan Bhaskaran Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a very pretty name, a very cool name, too. You were telling me the story behind it. Very unique.
Yeah, well, I used to be just plain old boring Duncan Brown, which is just like, but then I got married to my beautiful wife, and her heritage is from South India, around Kerala way, and we got married, and we didn't do anything about it. She just stayed Mrs. Bhaskaran, and I stayed Mr. Brown, and then we had our daughter, and we thought that we really ought to have the same names, and we had
Oh,
a lot of conversations about it. But then we decided on Bhaskaran Brown, and I think actually it does sound quite nice. And for
yeah.
some reason, bhaskaranbrown.com was available. So
That's really cool. Can you tell our listeners where you are?
yeah, so in a town called Abingdon, which is just outside of a city called Oxford, which undoubtedly your listeners will have heard of.
Yes, yes, definitely. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, thank you. I'm looking forward to having a bit of a chat. Always fun.
Yeah, me too. To start, can you tell us who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I help people to stop drinking. That's the kind of the mission in life. That takes various different forms. So I do some one-to-one coaching. I do a bit of group coaching. So I help people who've really got to the point where it's a bit too much. But increasingly, what more and more of my work involves is working with people like coaches and personal trainers and well-being consultants to help them to better understand alcohol and its effects on people's performance so that they can help the people who are maybe drinking at a moderate to severe kind of risk. They're not the kind of people you traditionally associate with having a problem with alcohol, but all problem drinkers start off in that moderate to severe category. So they're helping their clients to improve their productivity, get a bit more energy, get a bit more focus. But from my point of view, they're also doing a massive service making sure that people don't cross over to that threshold of dangerous drinking.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, can you tell us your journey with alcohol and drinking? When did that start?
So, I mean, that's a really interesting question. And I've spent a lot of time kind of really thinking about it and digging into it. And I think for me, it sort of started at school. I didn't really get on with the school system as I don't know, it might come across in our interview, but I am basically unemployable. It's like I'm the worst kind of like you just don't want me working for you. And a lot of school is about kind of regimenting people, getting people to all dress the same, all write the same, all behave the same. And if you tell me to do that, it's just never going to work. So I had a great childhood. My parents, wonderful, loving parents. I'm a very, very lucky guy, but I did struggle at school. Felt
Mm,
I felt a lot of tension and a lot of difficulty. And one of the ways that I coped with that was with chocolate and sweets and just a lot of very sugary food. And that seemed to help out for a little bit, but you grow up a little bit, don't you? And
mm,
you hit a certain age and you discover that there are other things out there. So I started drinking and smoking, and again, that seemed to help me with a little bit of social anxiety. I know it might surprise people to know that I used to be a little bit shy, I used to be a little bit nervous around other people.
mhm.
Now I'm standing on a podcast talking to as many people as I can. But back in the day, I was a little bit nervous, and the alcohol seemed to help with that. And it
Mhm.
just seemed to be part and parcel of the world that I grew up in. Everybody was drinking, every social event that we went to, it's all focused around alcohol. It was, I mean, honestly, it was glorified. I was growing up in the late 90s. There's a lot of kind of lad culture, Brit pop. It was all very much around drinking, and I sort of embraced it. Unfortunately, embraced it a little bit too much. Fast forward 20 years, and I was kind of sitting in the my flat, halfway through my second bottle of wine, wondering what the heck I'm doing with my life. And round about then was the sort of the time that I decided something needed to change.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for sharing your story with those who are either in the process of, getting clean and who wants to do better and do better. I myself, I've never drank, but I grew up with a alcoholic father, and he passed away in 2020 because he drank so much and toast. Um, and I know I'm not alone, who grew up around that. Was that something
Yeah.
you grew up around, or you just kind of, it started at school, as you mentioned?
I'd say my parents drink. They wouldn't describe themselves as heavy drinkers though.
Hmm.
So not in that sense. I mean, I was aware of adults who drank and drank reasonably heavily. So I had role models like that growing up, I suppose. But I had a pretty stable childhood. I mean, I was very lucky. For me, it was, I think it was about repeated exposure and just learning to use it as a coping mechanism. So it was, I
Hmm.
have stress in my life, I'm going to drink. That's going to help me to deal with the stress. Now, of course, I know these days it doesn't work, and I
Yeah.
can get quite boring on the subject if you like.
Yeah, yeah. Did you also use as well?
Yeah, so I started smoking cigarettes because a lot of my friends were smoking
Mm.
marijuana, and that's how I got addicted to nicotine, which is, give or take, well, it depends how you measure it, but in my opinion, it is the most addictive drug out there. So yeah, I was fairly quickly up to a box of cigarettes a day. Yeah, continued to smoke marijuana for thick end of 20 years. I tried other things, stimulants,
Mm.
amphetamine, cocaine, that sort of thing, but never too really problematic using.
Mm. Mhm.
Yeah, I got a little bit lucky there, or I guess I just ended up drinking because it was much easier to get hold of and cheaper.
Mm. In your opinion, what are some common stigmas that society have about people who do drink?
Well, I think the problem society has around people who drink heavily is that they tend to see it as a kind of A or B, a kind of binary, kind of like either you are fine or you are a problem drinker. And to an extent, that is something that has been encouraged by the alcohol industry. They're quite happy for us to blame certain people who have a problem with drinking rather than alcohol being a problematic substance in itself. They
Mhm.
want us to see it in the same way that we see, vegetables and lasagna. They want us to see it in the same way as when we go to the shops, you
Mm.
buy some popcorn, you buy some wine. It's the same thing, but it very much isn't. And actually, the harm that alcohol does, most of the harm comes from these moderate to severe
Mm.
drinkers, simply because there is a huge amount of them. Now, I'm not sure what the statistics are in Canada, but in the United Kingdom, 40% of people drink excessively at least once a month. So that would be more than 8 drinks at a time. And that's quite a high number. In America, it's 36%. So I suspect Canada is going to be about the same. There
Mhm.
are a lot of people that are actually drinking at dangerous levels, and they're doing it regularly. And it's those people that society does not think of as having a problem. That's where most of the harm takes place. So I think that's the biggest problem society has with the way it views alcohol, is it just wants to consider that kind of those super heavy drinkers, the real problem drinkers who lose their house, they lose their family, they lose their driving license. Those people, that's what they want to see as the problem drinkers, whereas actually it's much bigger than that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'd call it healthy drinking, except it's not. That possibly that's the mislabel that they put, assuming
Yeah.
that, excuse me, the homeless man is a drunk, or the poor person is a drunk, when really those who are driving Ferraris and have abundance, everything they need, they can actually
Yeah,
have issues too, possibly worse.
more so. Yeah. And the statistics back that up massively. Who are the people who are most likely to drink, more than 5 days a week?
Mm,
They're the high earners. Who are the people who are more likely to go to work under the influence of alcohol or with a hangover?
mm,
It's the high earners. It's the high earners that drink more. The
mhm,
irony is, of course, that the effects manifest themselves more in people who have less money, because there are a lot of other protective factors that kind of mitigate the harm that alcohol does. So if you have good access to medical care, good dentistry, you have a reasonably good diet, you have a good social system, you have a lot of support around you, you have meaning and purpose in your job, then the effects of alcohol, they're still there, but they're not going to be as obvious and as pronounced if you have very little money, very poor diet, no access to medical care, no meaning, no purpose, because you will have, additional problems that go along with that level of society. So while drinking is actually much higher in the affluent end, the problems tend to show themselves more in the
mhm,
poorer end.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Uh, let's talk about food. What is your experience with it, and what would you like to share about it?
So, like I said, I started off with chocolate because chocolate is a socially acceptable drug for an 8-year-old, isn't it? And I think I sort of looking back on it, I've always have had a fairly unhealthy relationship with food. I was drinking a lot and smoking, and that was the kind of thing that people would have like instantly flagged up. But actually, what went along with the drinking was, considering fried chicken to be a snack, and there was, yeah, I did not have a very good diet as a result of drinking. I mean, the two things went hand in hand.
Mhm,
And that is, of course, not uncommon. There's a lot of statistics out there about people who stop drinking and then develop problems with eating, and vice versa, that people who have gastric bypass surgery, for example, they have quite high rates of alcoholism after the
mhm,
surgery. So I think the two things very much march down the same street. So what I did was, after I stopped smoking, taking drugs, drinking alcohol, and listening to bad music, I thought, well, the only thing that's left to really kind of clear up was my diet. So I eat a largely whole food plant-based diet. So that's fruit, vegetables,
mhm.
beans and pulses, whole grains, and pretty much nothing else, as unprocessed as possible. So I cook about 95% of the food that I eat.
Wow, thank you for sharing. And it's fascinating and also uh realistic that food can impact us in so many ways. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, not everyone wants to be told what to eat, how to eat. It's like people get offended. That's for their personal life when really people are trying to guide and help them and not judging them.
yeah, absolutely. And I think part of it is awareness that it, it the way the food industry pushes messages into society is huge. And um I think a lot of people underestimate how pervasive it all is, because like sometimes I'll go to the supermarket and I'll buy fruit, I'll buy vegetables, they're both in the same section. I might buy some tinned beans and some dried grains, and I've gone to like 7% of the supermarket.
Hmm.
It's like I have gone to such a small amount of it. And you sort of think, well, actually, what is the rest of the supermarket for? Because it's
Mhm.
not actually food, it's food shaped objects, and that stuff gets on the shelves for the simple reason that it lasts longer, it's cheaper to manufacture, and it makes companies more money. If it, to be fair, if Nestle, General Foods, all of that lot, if they could make a lot of money out of broccoli, they would. But unfortunately, they can't.
No, no, they can't. Not all of us like our veggies.
I love broccoli. I'd eat it all day.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So when is it time for someone to get help if they're struggling with any types of addiction? What are some signs that people look for?
Well, I mean, I always think if you are worried that you might need help,
Mhm.
then that is always a fairly reliable sign that it's time to get some
Yeah,
help. I mean, once you've started worrying about it, it's already a problem, isn't it? Because you are concerned about
yeah,
it.
yeah.
There are a lot of good diagnostic tools out there. So on the front of my website is a quiz called Maybe Drink a Little Bit Less,
Mm,
and that's based on the World Health Organization's alcohol use test, which is very robust, and it will give you a very clear picture of whether you are drinking too much or not. The bonus to that is we actually added another section about all of the benefits that you could get. So it tells you that maybe you might be drinking a little bit too much and dialing it back would be a good idea, but it also tells you the wonderful benefits you'll get in terms of energy and focus and concentration, a bit more time on your hands, a bit more money in your pocket. So that's a very reliable way of judging whether your alcohol consumption is too much. But honestly, if you're concerned, I would encourage people to just like look about. I mean, there is so much information out there nowadays. There are so many great people on social media who are talking about sober living, about different ways of approaching it, the different journeys that people take towards finding the right balance for them and the right life for them. So, if you're concerned,
mhm,
look around, find some
yeah,
people, ask about. I I I interview people who've got sober a lot
mm,
because I do a lot of research and I am a little bit obsessed with the idea of what it is that keeps people sober, what those protective factors are, if you like. So I interview a lot of people and
yeah.
they are all desperate to share. They want to help. The community is
Yeah,
so full of people that
yeah.
want to share because, honestly, it has made such a difference to my life. You
Mm,
know, I, I'm getting to the point where I'm not so ready to admit my age in public anymore, but I'm in my mid-ish 40s, and I was smoking, I was eating terribly, and I was drinking heavily.
mhm,
Mid 40s, bloke with a stressful job, lifestyle like that. It's heart attack city, isn't it? So it's getting to the point where if I hadn't have changed everything sort of 8 years ago, then we wouldn't be having this conversation because I probably wouldn't still be alive. So
mm,
that is generally the level of joy that people are bringing to the community. Like they know how much it's changed their life, and
mhm,
therefore service is a massive part of that. They want to give
mm,
back. So connect to people, ask them some questions. They'll point you in the right direction.
mhm. Can you walk me through some of the techniques and processes that you use for your clients?
For sure. So I sort of sit within a field that might loosely be called cognitive realignment. It's a little bit like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, that some of your
Mhm.
listeners will undoubtedly have heard of.
I've done it.
And the idea behind it is to get to grips with your beliefs around what you do.
Mhm,
So I would argue that most of your actions are underpinned by your beliefs. So,
mhm,
like when you go and vote in elections because you believe democracy is important, you take the seeds out of chilies because you believe they're the hot bit.
mhm,
They're
mhm.
not, by the way, but your beliefs dictate your actions. So what we try and do is we try and get to grips with your beliefs. All of the things that you think alcohol provides for you or smoking provides for you or anything, we look at what you think it does for you and then we examine it. We decide whether those beliefs are true and whether they're helping you to live the life that you want to live.
Mhm,
Once we've worked through the beliefs, then we sort of do a little bit about thought management, which is helping you kind of interrupt the thoughts that are saying, let's go and have a drink or let's have a cigarette.
mhm, mhm.
And then once you've done the work around the beliefs and learn a little bit about thought management, then the actions are the easy bit. You will naturally change your actions. Once you change your beliefs and your
Mhm,
thoughts, your actions will follow.
mhm.
The problem that I've seen is most people try and do it the other way around. They
Mm,
try and stop drinking or stop smoking, and they hope that the thoughts and the beliefs are going to catch up, and they rarely ever do. Which is why, if you don't have to try too hard to find a miserable ex-smoker. There's a lot of them out there.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing. Do you do your work over Zoom, or who are your clients from different countries? Or is it just where you
Yeah.
are?
So I have a few clients who are quite local to me, but I've got clients from all over. And funnily enough, I started coaching in 2016, and but the nature of what I was doing, it meant that my client base was very national, so it was hardly ever local people. And what I would always do on the first phone call with them, I'd say, right, so we're going to do this coaching relationship. We can do it over the phone if you want. That's fine. I don't mind doing that. Or we can use this amazing piece of software. It's called Zoom. It's dead easy to use. All you need is a laptop. I'll talk you through how to do it. And nobody would ever take me up on it. But now everybody is just really happy to jump on Zoom and do the calls.
Mhm,
So that's the majority of the work I do. Yeah, it is
mhm,
online, and it's very effective because uh, the platform's great. It's very versatile, but it also gives it a degree of flexibility.
mhm,
That
mhm,
I can offer people a much wider range
mhm. Yeah,
of times that
that's
we can
awesome.
do.
Are
Yeah,
you also a dancer, or were you a dancer?
I am a dancer. So I do this thing called Morris dancing, which is a kind
Oh.
of traditional English folk dance,
Mhm,
which I have a feeling you would probably think was quite odd. It's hankies and bells, and we wear hats with flowers on. And
mhm,
honestly, that kind of scene, there's a lot of people that drink, and many
mhm,
of them drink quite heavily. And part of the reason why I started was because it is the kind of place where you can have a beer at sort of 11, 12 o'clock in the start of the day, and people don't bat an eyelid. So when I was drinking and I first started dancing, it was like, oh, this is great. I'm among people who actually make me look quite normal. This is fantastic.
yeah.
And then I stopped drinking, and I was sort of like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to keep dancing? Am I going to
Mm,
avoid these people? But because I didn't really have any desire to drink, I wasn't worried about going into pubs or into situations where other people were drinking. I knew I wasn't going to drink, so
mhm,
it didn't bother
mhm,
me. So I went to a few events, and I love it. And it turns out that it was never really about the drinking. I like dancing. I like the guys I dance with. I like the events we go to. I like the tradition of it because the style that we do has been danced in the town I live in for hundreds of years, and that's a really you know I like that. It kind of grounds me and connects me to a
mhm,
sense of place.
mhm. Yeah, that's awesome. And you're also an author. How many books have you written, and what are they about?
So my next book, which is number 4, is coming out on Boxing Day. That's called Real Men Quit, and it probably
Wow.
won't surprise you that it's aimed at men, and it's about stopping drinking. And I wrote that particularly because I've got a lot of time for people like Annie Grace, who your listeners might have
Mhm,
heard of. She wrote a
mhm,
book called This Naked Mind, very, very successful. And there are lots and lots of great women out there who've written some amazing books.
mhm,
Um, However, men are 2 to 3 times more likely to drink than or to have problems with drinking than women.
mhm,
In fact, there's a statistic which I'm not sure I entirely believe that says 73% of the alcohol worldwide is consumed by men. So it's like basically, if we were in a bar, I'd have 3 drinks, you'd get one. Doesn't sound fair, does it?
Yeah.
So there are a lot of men out there who are drinking in a dangerous way, and there's not so many voices in the sober community talking about how they can get out the other side. So that's why I excuse me, that's why I wanted to write that one. The one before that was called Get Overindulgence.
Mhm,
That's really my journey, and
mhm,
I, I wrote that because I wanted simply to show people that there is another way. I think that's one of the problems, that when you're living and you're kind of like every day, it's constant, it's stressful, you can't see another way out. You
mhm,
you don't think change is possible. You think this is it. you know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I wanted to just kind of like, in a fairly light-hearted way, hopefully quite a readable way, and it is short as well. Um, just say to people, look, there is another way. You can find a way through this, and
Mhm.
I used my journey as a vehicle to do that. And I'd love to offer your listeners a copy of that.
Yeah,
If they find me
absolutely.
on social media, I do a lot on Instagram and LinkedIn. So if you can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn, just connect with me. I'll send them a link. They can have excuse me, they can have an ebook or they can have the audio book. If they can put up with me doing silly voices, they can listen to the audio.
Are you also a comedian or you're just funny?
Well, I don't know. I am a little bit scared of stand-up comedy. I've never done it. It frightens me. I like to kind of come in the back door. People expect you to be quite serious if you're talking about weighty problems with alcohol. So when I turn up and I'm funny, it's a bit of a bonus. But when you're a comedian, they expect you to be funny. So
Oh yeah.
I don't think I'm really that funny. I just think
Yeah.
I'm exploiting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I could totally see you combining your story with comedy.
Yeah. I do try to get jokes in as much as possible because I think, look, change is important, and the stuff that I talk about is serious enough. And I think uh, there is a very real danger that we'll take it too seriously and we'll just put people off and we'll just bore people.
Mm.
So I try to write short,
Mhm.
funny, and readable. That's
Yeah. Yeah.
that way people actually finish it.
You kind of keep them going. There's a hook throughout the story. Yeah, that's really
Yeah,
cool.
well, I mean, look, that's shelf development, isn't it? That's what they call it. You've got that bookshelf full of worthy books that you've never read, you know. So,
Mhm.
and I think that is a shame. I think the books that change people are the ones that they actually read. So,
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
definitely, humor
Yeah.
is my friend.
Yeah. Um, are there a few or many success stories that you'd be willing to share at least one or two with us?
Yeah. So I've been working with somebody recently, CEO of a medium-sized organization. Their turnover is £3 million, 30 employees kind of thing.
Mhm.
And I think he's a really interesting case because he goes to that sort of that stereotype. You if you met him, you would think he's a very, very approachable, friendly guy. He's very confident. He knows his stuff. If you met him, there's no way you'd think, oh, well, he's got a problem with
Mhm.
drinking. And what I guess what happened to him was he started off drinking, and for him it was kind of tied up with masculinity itself, that he didn't really do that well at sports. He wasn't amazing with the ladies or anything like that, and he found that he could drink reasonably effectively. It was kind of the macho thing that he did, and
Mhm.
he sort of like used it to build up his credibility when he was younger. But
Mhm.
it built and it built and it built, and for most of his career he was doing okay. He was drinking uh, fairly heavily at the weekends, keeping it under control during the week. And then a few things happened at work. There were some difficulties. A few things happened at home, and it just kind
Mhm.
of escalated. And it got to the point where it really was affecting his productivity. It was affecting his
Mhm.
sleep. It was affecting his focus. It was
Mhm.
affecting his energy massively. He wasn't achieving the kind of things that he knew he could, and he really wanted to achieve. And that's when we started working together. And yeah, so I helped him to I mean, I take a kind of a coaching approach. So I don't ever tell anybody what to do, but we
Yeah.
talked it through, spent a lot of time talking about his beliefs, all of the things,
Mhm.
like literally, that he believed drinking made him a real man. That was that's a common one. And we talked through that, and he came to the conclusion that no, it really wasn't serving him. It wasn't doing anything for him.
Mm-hmm.
So why would he do it? And
Mm-hmm.
then we did a few kind of little tricks around thought management and understanding a little bit of the psychology behind it. And yeah, no, he's stopped drinking. He's got more time to look after somebody in his family's got
Mm-hmm.
some health problems, and he's got more time to devote to that. He's doing a lot better at work. He's way more relaxed, just smiling all the time, just enjoying life,
Yeah.
and that's what it's about for me.
Mm-hmm.
I like to help people get to the point where they can live the life that they want to, but more importantly, that they deserve to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What are your thoughts on triggers and trauma? Because, excuse me, I think that I've never been a drinker, but there's something we're trying to hide or cover or not feel. All right.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
drinking or substance kind of numb that. But it obviously it's not a long-term thing because it doesn't turn out good. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah. So I mean, that is a very good observation. I mean, a lot of people, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to an extent, use it to get away from their problems, ignore their problems, and for some people, that's kind of like the physical reality of life. That they aren't living the life that they want, that they're dissatisfied in some way, either personally or professionally. For some people, it can be mounting debt, it can be, the knowledge that their relationship is at some point going to fall apart, and they can kind of see it happening, and they're trying to pull away from it. So it can be kind of physical and environmental. But you're absolutely right. It can also be very much connected to pain and trauma, and it doesn't work. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, trust me, I tried it for 20 years. It really does not work, because what happens is you think that you're running away from things, but you're not running away from it, because that would imply that you're getting further away from it, and you don't. The things are still there.
Mm-hmm.
That you are actually just making yourself less effective at dealing with them. So
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of running round and round your problems, and the problems don't go away. They tend to just get bigger. And all that running just tends to make you tired. And
Mm-hmm.
it spirals and spirals and spirals. And that's a phrase that gets used a lot in the community, is rock bottom. That can take a very tangible, losing jobs and relationships,
Mm-hmm.
but it can also. I've met a lot of people who've just got to a point where enough is enough, and I think that's particularly around trauma. There is a big correlation between trauma and people drinking. We're doing a piece of research at the moment, and I haven't really properly interpreted the data, but my gut feeling, which is an awfully scientific thing to say, my gut feeling is that there's probably around 30 to 40% of the people that have responded that have got some kind of unprocessed childhood trauma, and
Mm-hmm.
that is at the heart of their drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And you are never going to drink that away. You have to do the work in
Yeah.
the therapeutic parlance.
Mm-hmm.
And then there is another big bucket full of people who have not childhood trauma, but trauma which would be around, you know, loss of children. That
Mm-hmm.
comes up an awful lot. Difficult, whether that's difficult pregnancies or, losing a child early in life. Death in general comes up, but also a lot of marital problems, business problems,
Mm-hmm.
employment problems. So that kind of trauma that happens to you in adulthood,
Mm-hmm.
that is often quite a big trigger as well.
Yeah.
But it is not the only thing. There are a number of people who drink for what might be described as less weighty or serious issues. I mean, they're serious enough to them, but that would be around social anxiety and wanting to fit in and things like that. But also, I've met people who they drink almost as an extreme sport.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they just they want something to kind of wake themselves up, and it's just like, well, you
Mhm.
know, get some skis.
Yeah,
Actually,
yeah,
yeah, that's
yeah.
quite a good one for Calgary, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with with trauma. I did observe quite a bit, even very young as a toddler watching my dad drink. And I noticed when there wasn't enough food, when he couldn't provide, or when he injured himself at work, it would get worse because it was um damaging his identity as a man and his
Yeah,
self-esteem,
yeah,
self-love. And when something went wrong, he went back to it. It's kind of it's a life trigger, I call it. And it's constant. And I feel
yeah,
that with your work, you're teaching people what those triggers are, to not run to the bottle, but to
yeah,
run to their heart, to really kind of meditate on what is causing them to freak out when they get triggered.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, I think you've really hit on something about, being a provider. That's
Oh,
something that's a particularly male thing. We feel like
yeah.
we have to bring home the broccoli.
Mhm.
Do you like the way I veganized that expression?
Yeah, yeah.
But we do. There's a lot of pressure on that, and that can be difficult, and people struggle to deal with that. Men are not necessarily well known for talking about their feelings.
Mhm,
So what do? We bottle it up,
mhm, mhm.
literally. And I think it's something that's very interesting. I mean, genetics, they've chucked a lot of money at genetic research over the
Yeah,
last
yeah.
20 years or so. And there are some minorly correlated bits of genetics that might have something to do with predisposing you to addiction.
Mm,
But the reason why so many people who have problems with drinking
mhm.
have developed them because their parents have problems with drinking. It's not genetics. It's those lifestyle triggers that you talked about.
Mhm,
The it's living with somebody who has
mhm,
such a serious problem that takes a big toll on people. That creates childhood
mhm.
trauma.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I guess I'm the black sheep out of my family. No drinking, no nothing, but I know for other people in there, they run to that just to get a bit of comfort here and there. And I stay away from it because I have mental health issues. That's I'm already high. So
Yeah.
yeah, so let's talk about mental health with men and substance abuse. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so that again is a fascinating subject, and there's so much to unpick with that.
Hmm.
That you look at depression and heavy drinking tend to go hand in hand,
Hmm.
and you get into this really big chicken and egg scenario. It's like, well,
Yeah.
are you drinking because you are depressed, or are you depressed because you are drinking?
Mm.
With all of these things, it is a little bit of both. I mean, certainly there are some things. So, post-traumatic stress disorder makes you about 3.5 times more likely to develop a problem with
Mm.
alcohol. ADHD makes you about 2 times more likely. There are a lot of
Mm.
underlying medical health problems that impact on the likelihood of you getting a
Mhm,
problem with drinking.
mhm,
I think the real problem, certainly in the UK, I don't know how it translates to Canada, but
mhm,
there is a separation between mental health services and drinking services.
mhm,
And that really doesn't make very much sense to me, as drinking is a mental health condition. It's like it's in
mhm,
the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Health. It's like literally, it's where you find it.
mhm,
It's a mental health condition, but they separated the two out. And I've met so many people who just get caught between the two. Mental health people don't want to talk to them until they've sorted out their drinking. But the people who are trying to sort out their drinking are failing because they've got underlying mental health issues.
mm,
And I think this is always kind of a tension within in the recovery community, I've met a lot of people who have taken a therapeutic route. So
Mm,
they've done the work either psychologically, they've done a kind of top-down sort of talking therapy,
mm,
or they've done something much more bottom-up around yoga or embodiment and processing the trauma that way. But they've done the therapeutic work, and they found naturally the drinking kind of falls away
mhm,
because what they thought it was doing for them, they no longer need. So it doesn't make any sense for them to stop drinking
mhm,
anymore. So that is obviously a legitimate route to getting sober because there are a lot of people that do it. But
mhm,
then there are other people who will sort of say, it is easier to do the work once you've stopped drinking.
mhm.
I sort of incline to
Yeah.
that field of thought because that's my experience. I stopped drinking and then I started working on
Mhm,
myself
mhm,
mentally, physically,
mhm,
emotionally, spiritually, kind of thing.
mhm.
So
Yeah.
that's my path, but I wouldn't impose that on anybody. I think the most important thing to do is to do the work. And I mean, I was working briefly with somebody, a friend of a friend,
Mhm.
um, and they're really not the kind of person that I'm good at dealing with because they had a lot of underlying issues.
Yeah.
Um, I won't go through the laundry list, but we managed to find her therapeutic community, and
Mm,
she's going through all of that. And I know once she's worked her way through the trauma and
mhm.
worked her way through her story and realized that actually it's not all her fault, and it's one of the most tragic conversations that you have with people when they're stuck in this hole and they genuinely think that the reason that their
Yeah.
parents struggled was their fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you're
It
right.
breaks your heart kind of thing. But no, she's found this kind of therapeutic community, but you
Mm,
have to be sober to go there. And it was like, yeah, but keeping her sober for more than a couple of days is almost impossible because as soon as she
mhm,
gets sober, it all just comes back like a hammer,
mhm, mhm.
So it is difficult, but there is a way through. There is
Yeah.
always a way through.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's a package. It's the fact that they separate that. I'm like, wow.
Yeah,
We're not
yeah.
healthcare professionals or doctors, but we know that those two combined, people need to work through them and not separate them. I have a very important question for you. Woman to men, why is it so hard for men to talk about their damn feelings, to get through them? It's so hard.
Okay, so I in fairness to us as a breed, I think we do get a lot of messages about how we shouldn't talk. There is a lot of conscious and subconscious messaging in childhood
Mhm.
about how boys don't cry.
Yeah.
Boys are tough. That's what they do. They
Mm,
just suck it up and get on with it.
mm.
And we both know that doesn't work.
No.
We both know what comes out the other end of that. Violence, alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide,
Mhm,
all of that.
mhm,
I think a lot of it can be traced back to
mhm,
that. And yeah, we're told a lot um, that we shouldn't complain and we shouldn't moan. We should just go out, earn the broccoli, come home. That's your role as a man.
mhm,
And then, certainly over my lifetime, there has been this more kind of like, well, men should talk more. We should do that.
mhm.
And I agree, but that's not very consistent. So I don't blame women at all, but I know that there are some women out there who will say that they want their man to talk and to be emotional, but actually get quite annoyed when they are because
Ah,
they kind of don't want it at the same time. So we caught
yeah.
in a little bit of a crossfire. So there's a lot of stuff in society. People we're not our own, and I include men in this. I was a firefighter for 10 years, and
Mhm,
that is a pretty all male environment, and
Mhm.
even if you just like were slightly concerned about another one of the guys, you'd get punched and told to just get on with it, and
Oh, wow.
they would say some stuff that I couldn't say on a polite podcast like this. So I don't think we help
Yeah,
ourselves. But
yeah.
one of the reasons why I think men are really, really awful at talking is
Mhm.
because men are also awful at listening. We just we don't listen to each other. We don't give each other the space to talk things through, and that's the ingredient, I guess, that a lot of people miss.
Mhm.
Just talking doesn't work. You need to have somebody to listen to you. So maybe we should reframe it and say that men aren't bad at talking, we're bad at listening.
Wow, you answered my question very well. Yeah, I agree, and it's hard, and it's we've been programmed or reprogrammed, I may say, and it starts very young, since childhood, like you said. But yeah, that does make sense when you explain it that way, and also
I mean,
women
what I
where.
like to kind of try and offer people is, a way of understanding who they are
Mm,
first and foremost, because some people take very well to talking therapy. It naturally suits their disposition, it suits their learning style, it suits the way they approach the world. They're not the ones that we're talking about, though, are we? There are a lot of a lot of guys and a lot of women as well who are quite practical, and they just want to get on with stuff, and they don't quite get the idea about standing around and talking about it. Doesn't make too much sense to them. So I like to kind of work with them and find ways for them to express their emotions in a positive way. And sport done right can be very, very therapeutic, can be very useful, and generally washes a little bit better with the men. I always try and get them to dance because I think dancing is a fantastic, you kind of like, it's a bottom up way of expressing your emotions through your body. It's fantastic, very cathartic for me. Got a lot of free therapy, Morris, dancing. But then they don't take to it quite so much as the sport.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
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 and I think everybody should do yoga, but I guess most people are probably bored of being told they should do
yeah.
yoga, right?
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I was gonna say most women are emotional creatures, and some men are. That's why
I
there are
think we all
always
are.
clashes in relationships, because the woman's there crying, and the man is not really always looking at the tears that are falling. When the woman wants, the hugs and support, and yeah, it's a very interesting clash that happens.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly something from my own relationship with my wife.
Mhm.
I had to learn that when she said she wanted help, she didn't mean she wanted some shelves building. She wanted a hug, because I think, like I say, it varies from man to man. But a lot of us, we are quite practical, and we think, right, there's a problem, let's solve it.
Yeah.
What are we going to do about it? And of course,
Mhm.
what you're actually asking for is to talk about it and to
Mhm.
feel supported. But I mean, I think we are all emotional creatures. At the end of the bend,
Yeah.
if you see out of the corner of your eye a snake, then you will have an emotional reaction. And unless your head is full of sawdust, you will have an emotional reaction.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. What are some messages or key points that you'd want to say to nurses and people that are working with anybody who's in addiction and struggling?
So, I mean, anybody who works in the healthcare profession, honestly, you really, really do have my admiration.
Mhm.
Uh, I worked for the National Health Service for about 10 years, but I worked in the easy bit of the National Health
Mhm.
Service. But it opened my eyes enough to know how hard some of these people
Mhm.
work. I mean, it is amazing. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I know that a lot of healthcare providers, they would love to do more. They would love to. So the World Health Organization recommends that there are certain high-risk groups that should be screened annually for alcohol use. And then after their screening, they should be delivered a series of brief interventions, depending on the severity of their drinking. And I know most healthcare providers would love to do that,
Yeah.
but they don't have the resources. They are increasingly stretched. I'm sure that's true in Canada. It's
Yeah.
definitely true in the United Kingdom. And, that's one of the things that I want to do is to help businesses find a way to take some of that pressure off, because a lot of businesses are throwing a lot of money at well-being and resilience because they think that it will increase their bottom line, and it does. Healthy employees are productive employees, but a lot of businesses just finding that their well-being programs aren't that effective because very few of them actually have any kind of interventions around drugs, alcohol, smoking. And I don't care how good a yoga teacher you are. You aren't going to get through to somebody if they're drinking 2 bottles of wine a night. That's the problem. That's what you need to deal with. It's like, I think a lot of wellness interventions in companies, it's sort of like they're doing 360-degree feedback to somebody who's in a burning building. You don't need feedback. You need to get out of the building. And, a lot of people, what they need is some tools to help them get their drinking under control. And that will massively reduce their stress. And then they can start to actually access all of this good stuff that these companies are doing around health and well-being. But for me, there's this massive missing element. And that's one of the reasons why healthcare providers are so stretched, because the money that's gone into it in businesses is not always being as well spent as it could be. So there was a survey recently that said 16% of employers are actually providing some sort of assistance around alcohol, which is woefully.
Yeah. I mean, during the pandemic, the healthcare professionals, they went as far as they could, and they were stretched, and there is still not enough resources up to this day.
No.
Let's say you had the power to make change. I don't like the word politic because I think all of us should be included in decisions we make. Do you have prime minister where you are?
Yes. I believe Rishi Sunak is still in office.
Okay, let's say, hey, that the prime minister invites you to go have a chat in lunch and hear more of what you're doing. What would you say to him or her?
Well, that's easy because, genuinely, the work has already been done. There is a whole ton of really, really effective science-based policies that the government could introduce tomorrow. Things like minimum unit pricing. Alcohol is cheap. It's ludicrously cheap, and it's got cheaper over the last 30 years. Alcohol has done that. Inflation has done that. So alcohol is relatively way cheaper than it was, when I started drinking. So sort the pricing out, and as I say, there's been a lot of research done that proves the more it costs, the less people drink. Take it out of the supermarket. Use the kind of government monopoly systems like they have in Scandinavia, where you're not actually allowed to sell alcohol next to sweets and crisps. And then people instantly stop thinking about it like food. Stop. You can get alcohol delivered to your house in the middle of the night. And I was working with somebody, honestly, you take one step through their front door and you would know they are an alcoholic. Yet these companies were still delivering to her, regularly. And that's immoral. So that should be illegal. But restricting the availability has a massive amount of influence on the amount people drink. Then education is so important. Countering the message that society will sell you about how alcohol relaxes you, makes you deal with stress, makes every event perfect. So countering the messages that are already out there, ban alcohol advertising and ban product placement. There is so much product placement. I did some research into Netflix, just simply because I don't ever want to get any money from Netflix. Just
Mhm.
keep kicking them. I think they're going to put my subscription up. I kick them so much. But we
Yeah.
studied 37 Netflix original programs. They were branded 15 or 18, so most of them, like it's actually below the legal drinking age, but 86.5% of them had alcohol in them. The average time that alcohol was depicted in each one was around 10 minutes, 9 and a bit minutes.
Mhm.
And if you actually spend any time thinking about product placement or learning about product placement, the ideal time to have products placed in drama is after people have settled in, got used to it, kind of got into the thing a little bit, but not too long, because if you
Yeah.
leave it too late, they get too absorbed in the drama. So
Mhm.
generally, around about 10 minutes is the sweet spot. So, either Netflix have accidentally done the most amazing piece of
Mhm.
promotional work for the alcohol industry, or there's something going on there.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for sharing. I'd if I was in power, I'd also restrict what people who are struggling with alcohol can buy and how much. Could be with a card saying this person is allowed that and the reason. If they go to any store, they need to show
Well,
that card.
I wonder whether in 20 years' time, at some point, we're going to move beyond cash, aren't we? And everything is going to be paid
Robotic.
for by some sort of electronic
Yeah.
transfer.
Yeah.
And, it'll probably be embedded in your finger and you like that, but we will know who is buying what. And if we know who is buying what, then you could do something like consumptive taxation. So
Mhm.
you want to drink one Coke, that's fine. We'll charge you, normal price. But you want to drink two Cokes that day, well, we're going to charge you more because we know there's a knock-on health uh, effect to that. You can start to actually charge for the externalities, the bits that big companies never pay for.
Mhm.
And alcohol would be something that would be perfect for that. You want to go and have a drink with your friends, you want to have one glass of wine with your meal. I'm
Mhm.
not going to grudge you. Have it.
Yeah.
Enjoy
Yeah.
it. It's the second one's going to cost you more. The third one's going to cost you even more. You're only going to need a mortgage for the fourth one.
Yeah, yeah. I think we might have talked about this already, but let's touch a little bit on the stigma that society have when it comes to alcohol. Example could be someone, who's struggling, man, who lost their job and divorce and a death, you name it. And they go to drinking, not because they want to numb what they're feeling. And here society or people who know nothing of what they're going through. They're calling them cheap alcoholics, or just very bad names. Tell me what you'd say to those people.
Yeah, the thing that I kind of would love to say to everybody really is
Mm,
that you are enough. That you
mm,
don't need alcohol, you don't need drugs, you don't need food, you don't need, well, you do need food. I mean, you've got to eat, but you don't need the junk
yeah.
food, you don't need the
Yeah.
chocolate, you don't need the sweets. Um, you are enough. You have everything inside you that you need to live a perfect, happy, fulfilled life.
Mm,
And I guess there is a huge irony in that stigma that everybody is happy to have a drink with Uncle Jeff, aren't they? He's the life and soul of the party until
yeah.
he isn't, And
Mm,
everybody will be standing around the bar going, "Good old Uncle Jeff, he's getting the beers in again." But
mhm,
then, as soon as Auntie Christina kind of finally has had enough of Uncle Jeff's rampant and uncontrolled drinking, and she leaves him and he gets fired from his job, all of a sudden everybody's not so keen on talking to Uncle Jeff, are they? You know,
yeah. Yeah.
they're quite happy when it's all fun and games, but when it actually becomes serious,
Mhm,
and that's what I really want to get across to people, that these two things are not
mhm,
different things. They are the same.
mhm.
Alcohol is a product that does harm. It kills people. We shouldn't think about it as just this kind of harmless thing that we do on the weekend.
Yeah.
Alcohol, it should be regulated as heavily as a firearms industry,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Agree. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah, and I'm a witness to that. That's why I advocate and talk about those topics and have powerful, profound interviews with people like you who's been through it and who's doing the work. My dad, he died in 2020 from alcohol poisoning or whatever they call it. And throughout my childhood, it was rough. I didn't know when daddy was gonna be angry. I didn't know when he would slap my mom, or I didn't know. And
Yeah,
you could smell it up to this day. I don't like the smell of alcohol and cigarette. I love people who choose to do it. I'm not saying, hey, you're a bad person because you do that. Again, there's a root to it. But I'm proof and I'm witness of what it can do, the havoc it can cause in
yeah,
people's lives.
yeah. And the thing is, it's not uncommon.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
because I obviously talk quite a lot about this, and I say to people, yeah, they, I'm at a networking thing. They go, oh, what do you do? I say, I help people stop drinking, and they go, you should meet Uncle Jeff. Because everyone's got an Uncle Jeff. Like
Mhm.
literally every time I talk to somebody about what I do, it's
Mhm.
like I've got a friend in AA.
Mhm.
My daughter, she's just left her husband, love of her life, but she can't live with him anymore because he's drinking.
Mhm.
Um, you've got a friend who has been in and out of rehab. Like, and those three examples, it's like the last week, you
Mm.
know?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And
Literally
mm,
everybody I meet. It's so common in society. Yeah, it's just swept under the carpet. It's ignored,
mhm.
and people just want to carry on drinking margaritas and pretending that it would never happen to them.
Yeah. 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 Definitely. Um, did you already share where listeners can find you? I think you did.
So always worth sharing where people can find me. So Duncan Bhaskaran Brown.
Mhm.
If you can spell it, I am dead easy to find. So
Mhm.
I've got a website. I mentioned that there's a test on there that will help you get to grips with it, whether your drinking is maybe getting a bit out of hand. There's a bunch of other stuff on there. I put a lot of things on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you connect with me on either LinkedIn or Instagram, send
Mhm.
me a message. I will send you a link for an ebook or the audio book.
Mhm.
Other than that, you can come around my house and have biscuits if you want, but it's a bit far from
Biscuits and tea.
Calgary, isn't
You
it?
guys have lots of tea?
So I drink a lot of tea, but it's not really tea. I always call it tea, but it's not the tea. I drink a lot of mint and I like a turmeric, very
Mm.
anti-inflammatory, good stuff. And
Okay.
like fennel tea. I drink that like that. It's going out of fashion.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Last question for you. What is the meaning of life for you?
Oh, it's a scorcher, isn't it? I guess I'm going to have to agree with Gandhi on this one.
Mm.
I find myself and I renew my sense of self every day in helping other people,
Mhm.
and I always like to mention Gandhi when I say that because
Mm.
he was quite keen on meditating. He was somebody who spent a lot of time looking inside himself, yet he still believed that the way to find yourself, to really find meaning and purpose in your life, is through the service of other people.
Mm.
And that is such a strong thing, and it fills me full of joy and
Yeah.
motivation. And
Mhm.
I'm a really lucky guy. I
Mhm.
love what I do, and I love talking about it. I hope that came across, by the way. I'm just blessed, and it is all because I get to help other people. Somebody turned around to me the other day and said, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for you, Duncan. And I,
Oh,
you can't
yeah.
you can't get better than that. There's like literally very few things people can say to you that gets anywhere near that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Wow.
just go out and do what you can to reduce the
Mhm.
suffering of others, and
Mhm.
you will magnify your joy.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, Duncan, thank you so much for your time. And
Oh,
today,
thank you. It's, it's
yeah,
it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed it.
yeah, I know. Now it went by already. I'm like, hell with the time. Yeah, talking to you today has kind of helped me go back to my childhood to heal from it, if that makes sense. Because hearing from a man's perspective, it's like I'm talking to my father. I can kind of feel a man's pain, if that makes sense. And so
Yeah.
I thank you for that. It's not only men's life you're changing. Here I am across the world from you. Look what you just did. And
Oh,
I
thank you.
know I have people who's going to listen to this. And I had someone who asked me, have I talked to anybody on the podcast about this topic? I said, I'm going to pray about it and look for people. And here you are.
Yeah, cool. No, look, thank you. That is a beautiful thing to say,
Mhm.
and I believe so strongly in the power of story,
Yeah.
and I think by spending some time trying to understand our own stories and
Mhm.
sometimes change them from negative stories into more positive stories, and I think the key to doing that is often understanding other people's perspective and
Mhm.
realizing that most people that do you wrong, they don't do it because they're evil or they're stupid. They just do it because they're human.
Ooh, you're going to leave me with that for the day. Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate all you do.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.